Hello, in this video we will look into functions and methods in Go. First, let us look into functions. So, what are functions? So, functions are some method or some business logic that we want to execute within our code or within our application, right? So, it could be a business logic, it could be a helper method, helper function, whatever it is. It could be as simple as printing something or adding some numbers, etc. Okay, so first let us see how we can define or declare our function. Declaring a function is very straightforward. So we need to start with a keyword called func followed by the name of the method. In the bracket we need to specify the data type. Let's say x, which is of type int. You could supply multiple arguments here and the return type. If you have just one return type, okay, then you could just specify that return type and you could have some business logic and then you could return some value. If you had multiple return types, then in that case you would have a function name. It could take some argument, let's say arg1 int. It could also take arg2, which is string, let's say. And to have multiple return types, you need to specify those return types in the bracket. Okay, let's say it returns first as integer and second as error. Same, you could have some business logic and return both the values. Something like this. One thing you need to note here is the naming. If your function name starts with the lowercase letter, then those functions can be invoked only from the package where these functions are defined. If you want this function to be invoked from other packages, then the first letter of your function name needs to be uppercase. Okay, so keep this in mind. This is a very important concept. If you want your function to be available to packages apart from where it is defined, then the first letter of your function name should be capitalized. Great. Other is anonymous function. Now anonymous functions are functions which do not have a name, right? So it is as good as func, something which takes argument, returns, and in order to run it you will have to give a bracket at the end. So we will see this in action for a simple use case where we will have a increment age which would return a function and then you can execute that function. Okay, so let us see this in action. So I go to Visual Studio Code. So I have two folders created, functions and methods. So I'll go to main.go within functions. Let's say we want to create a method to add two numbers. So we use keyword func. I would want this method to be available to other packages outside of main. So I will have the first letter in uppercase, which will expose this method to other packages. It takes in two values, let's say a and b, and returns an integer. Return a plus b. Very simple, adds two numbers. In order to invoke this, I just need to call that method add. It takes in two values, let's say 2, 3. It returns an integer. So I just need to assign it using the shorthand operator or the normal method of using where. It's up to you. It says that the res variable is declared but not used. So what we could do is we could just do a fmt.println and we could say sum of the two numbers is res. Okay, so in order to run this we could do go run functions main.go and we see sum of the two numbers is 5. Great. Let us look into multiple values. So I will call something called multiple return values as the function, which doesn't take anything, but let's say it returns a string and or an error. Okay, so string or an error. So as I said, if there is a multiple thing, you need to put it in the bracket, and in the declaration I could have something like return hello there, and let's say we don't have any error for now, so I'll just return nil. In order to use this, you could use this, you could do res comma error, call multiple return values. So it says error is declared but not used, so we could do error not equal to nil. We'll just print ln, which says error dot error. Okay, if there is no error, we would want to print our result, so we'll do print ln result of multiple values is okay. So what does this say? It says that cannot use multiple value of as int value in assignment. Okay, so the problem is on top this result was having int. Okay, so that's my bad, so we will change it to val. Okay, let's run this again. You see, result of multiple values is hello there. Now what if there was an error? So we will just have something like errors.new and say something went wrong. Okay, now in this case it should go into the error block, as the error is no longer nil, right? Because we are throwing an error here. So if you run this, you see something went wrong. Great. Let us look into the another anonymous function. And so in order to have an anonymous function, you could just run a function here. Let's say function without name. Okay, I could have something, and what does it says? Expected expression syntax. Okay, so what this means is, okay, so this is a anonymous function, so it should not have a name. Okay, else it won't make sense, right? So and here we could just print something like fmt dot println anonymous function invoked. Okay, so if and you see, to invoke we have this braces at the end which says run it when it executes it, right? You see, anonymous function invoked. Great. So other thing what we could say is a function returning a function. So let's say I have a func called increment age, which takes in age, let's say is int, and it returns function. Okay, it returns a function with int as the return type. Okay, so here I could do return func, okay, which returns integer, and I could do age plus 1. So basically this age is available to the inner function. Okay, so basically it stores it, so it has access to those. This is basically a concept of closures. Okay, and now if I want to execute it, let's say new age equal to increment age, let's say I pass 30. Okay, so if I try to print new age? It won't, because the new age is a function and it's not a value. So if I would have to execute it. Okay, so now if I run, you see 31, which is incremented age. Okay, so that's all for functions. Let us go back to methods. Okay, now methods are something that we could invoke on a struct object. Okay, for example, let's say if I had a person, okay, and we create an object P in person, and let's say person had fields like name, age, and we wanted a function available on that object, let's say update age, right? So in that case we can make use of methods. So how that works is, let's say if we had a type person struct, okay, and it has name, which is string, and age, which is int. If we want a method update age, okay, then what we need to do is we need to have a func keyword, but before the function name it needs to take something known as a receiver object. Okay, now the receiver object is the object on which we want this update age method. In our case it is person, so let's have P person. Okay, it can also have a return type, let's say person in this case. Okay, and you could have the business function here. Okay, now in this case this is known as a value receiver because it is taking an object. Now as we have seen in our previous videos, when we call invoke a function and we pass an arguments in Go, it always creates a copy of it. It doesn't update the same reference, right? If we want it to update the same reference, then we need to have asterisk in front, which means this is a pointer receiver object. Okay, in this case it will make the changes to the object's reference, so it won't create a copy. Okay, so let us see this in action. So for this I will go back to Visual Studio Code. I'll open the main.go. Let us first define a person struct. So type person struct, let's say two values, name, age, and let's say I want to have a function called update age. So as I said, func, it needs to take a value receiver. We will do that in some time. Update age, and let's say it returns a person. Okay, now here for now we will use a value object or a value receiver, P person. Okay, what this does is P dot age equal to P dot age plus 1, basically increment age. So let's not make it update, let's say increment age as a method on this object. Okay, and it should return person, so we will just do return P. Okay, so what we will do is we'll create an object P person, name, okay, so okay, it is name. Okay, now it complains that we are not using it. Okay, so what we will do is P equal, what we will do is P dot, you see, increment age. Okay, and if we do a print ln now. Okay, this is interesting. Let's say we just want to print the age, and if we run this, you see the age is just 32. That is, it has not incremented it. The reason is, as I mentioned, this is a value receiver, right? And it has created, when we do this p.increment, it has created a copy. So if I had assigned it again to a variable, right, like this, and if I had run, then you would see 33. But in this case, it had created a copy, and that copy value I am again assigning it to the same reference. But if we don't want to do this and we want it to act on the reference itself, we can rather do a pointer receiver by just putting an asterisk sign here. Okay, and in that case this would be a pointer. Okay, now if I run this, I don't even have to return in this case. That's the beauty, right? If you see here, we are not returning. And now if I run this again, I should see 33. And there you go. So this is what you will see a lot in most of the examples as you start working with Go. You will use this construct more often, that is the pointer receiver, because this helps in reducing the number of copies that we create, etc. So this is the ideal way in order to deal with such use case. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover as part of this video, where we have seen functions and methods in Go. In the next video, we will look into interfaces. If you have not subscribed to my channel, then I request you to please do so that it helps you get the alert on every new video that I publish. As well, it will motivate me to create more and more of this kind of videos to share my experience with you. I will see you in the next video. Until then, happy learning.